Good evening, everybody. Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain, near the end of the month, 27th of February, 2026. I hope you're doing well. And we are, in fact, apparently, and I say we, though not in America, on the eve of war. Non-essential personnel are being evacuated from the embassy in Iran. And was it Iran? Israel? The poop-filled ships are in the Middle East, and apparently sailors are flushing shirts down the toilets so that they don't have to fight, because they can't fix these toilets without going into dry dock. And it looks like it is all very imminent. And according to Levant Kemal, Iran apparently has agreed to give up its stockpile of enriched material and allow for full verification by the IAEA of its nuclear program, according to U.S.-Iran talks mediator Oman's foreign minister. That's from CBS. Maybe it's all a big giant bluff. Maybe Trump's approach of threatening war will get the concessions that they want, and maybe it will be avoided for now, or maybe the blood-soaked Fiat Munich human disassembly mercenaries will get their wish and get to just disassemble as many human beings as their bloody lusts demand, require, prefer, or want. We shall see. Maybe this is why Trump was allowed to get back in. It would have been pretty tough to sell the invasion of Iran for various reasons to Biden and Harris, but maybe Trump is necessary to sell this war to the evangelicals. It is the evangelical Christians who are the drivers behind this war. And I've had a more positive relationship with Christianity recently. Pretty sure that's not going to continue. Because if it wasn't for the mass superstition of the evangelical Christians, this war would be inconceivable. Inconceivable. And the ghouls behind the pulpit are driving this battle, which could escalate and spread into a wider arena in a truly terrifying way. Christianity is not having its finest fucking moment at the moment, to put it mildly. Well, we can talk about that. We can talk about whatever's on your mind. Happy to take your questions, comments, whatever's on your mind. We have a caller, and you're welcome, of course, on X to bring your calls to the fore. If you want to unmute, I'm all ears.
Absolutely. All right, if we leave the Christian point aside, I have a question for you about the whole Trump negotiation thing. If the U.S. is going into negotiations about nuclear materials with Iran, would you prefer a Trump who didn't posture as if the worst possible outcome could be the result of not getting along with us?
Okay, let's talk about it. What risk do you see coming from Iran to the average American citizen?
It seems like you ignored my question there. Do you think the negotiations don't need to happen when it comes to the nuclear material in Iran?
Well, I'm asking you a question.
I asked one first. My first question was,
okay, it's my show, bro. It's my show. My show.
Yeah, it is your show, but I asked you a question.
Yes, and I'm trying to answer that question, but I need to get your perspective first. Because the first thing when it comes to negotiations is trying to figure out whether they're necessary at all.
Right, that's why so you don't think it's necessary to...
No, I didn't say that. I asked you what you perceive to be the risk from Iran to the average American. If you perceive that risk to be high, that would be a reason to negotiate. If you don't perceive that risk to be high, that would be a reason to not negotiate. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I think that messianic regimes should not have nuclear weapons.
Messianic regimes, what does that mean?
People who believe that the 12th Imam has to return, and before that can happen, a third of the world's population has to die in war, and it's the duty of the faithful to make that happen in order for the 12th Imam to come back. That type of person should not have nuclear weapons.
So what you're saying is that all countries with a desire to expand their borders and to extend their rule should be denied nuclear weapons.
No, that's a different standard. What I was saying was all leaderships like the Council of Elders in Iran who believe that the world has to come to an apocalyptic end in order for paradise to be achieved, those people should not have nuclear weapons. Maybe others shouldn't also, but those people should definitely not.
So you're saying, and forgive me for not knowing much about the theological beliefs of the leaders in Iran. I'm not disagreeing with you, but help me understand their particular belief system and how that's going to manifest in a nuclear attack on America.
Yeah, I didn't say it would. So the belief system of the Council of Elders who believe themselves to basically own the people of Iran is that the 12th Imam has to come back. But before that can happen, a third of the world's population has to die in famine, and a third of the world's population has to die in war. And it's the duty of those who are the true believers to help make those two conditions a reality so that he can come back. That's the type of belief of the persons who are looking for nuclear weapons. At least
So,
that's what they say they
so they
believe.
believe that 2/3 of humanity has to die for their Messiah to return. Is that right?
Yeah. So if you believe that Christians in America have apocalyptic beliefs, they don't have the religious belief that they have to bring about the end of the world, just that it's going to happen. But the Iranian leadership has a specific sect of Islam where they believe the 12th Imam cannot come back until they do the faithful work of eradicating a third of the world's population in war.
Okay, I'm sure you're correct. Of the world's, I'm just checking, population has to die in war. Okay. I'm just double checking to make sure I get.
There's
Uh,
all sorts of questions about whether or not they really believe that and all of that. I mean, there's lots of questions involved, but that's what they say they believe. So I'll let you have some time to check that first,
sure.
actually.
No, the Iranian leadership does not hold the belief that a third of the world's population must die in war as a literal mandatory prerequisite they actively seek to enforce through policy or action. However, elements of 12er Shia eschatology, end times belief centered on the return of the 12th Imam, do include ancient hadiths describing massive global catastrophes before his reappearance, and some interpretations reference roughly 2/3 of humanity perishing, or 1/3 from war or violence, 1/3 from plague disease, leaving 1/3 to witness his arrival and the establishment of justice. These hadiths appear in Shia collections and describe apocalyptic signs of turmoil, oppression, and widespread death preceding the Mahdi's manifestation. They're not uniform. Some narrations vary the proportions, and so on. Mainstream 12er theology emphasizes that the timing of the Mahdi's return is known only to God, and humans cannot force or precisely predict it, though piety, justice, and resistance to oppression can prepare the ground. During Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's presidency 05 to 13, apocalyptic rhetoric peaked. He frequently invoked hastening the Mahdi's return and reported believed global chaos, including wars, could accelerate it. Some analysts link to this to Iran's nuclear pursuits or proxy conflicts, citing hadiths about massive deaths. Figures like former IRGC affiliates or hardline clerics have echoed similar views, framing regional confrontations, e.g. against Israel or the West, as part of end times preparation. Current leadership under Khamenei, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, and the broader regime prioritize regime survival, exporting the Islamic Revolution, countering perceived enemies, US, Israel, Sunni rivals, and advancing Shia influence. While Mahdism remains a core ideological pillar, Khamenei frees his policies in terms of defending Islam, resisting arrogance or imperialism, preparing the Ummah, Muslim community, rather than deliberately engineering global mass death. Public statements focus on justice, anti-Zionism, and resilience, not explicit calls for billions to die. In short, while certain Shia hadiths describe catastrophic pre-Mahdi deaths, including war-related, and some Iranian figures, especially in the Ahmadinejad era, have drawn on apocalyptic themes to justify militancy or view global tensions favorably, the current leadership does not doctrinally require or pursue a specific one-third casualty figure in war or policy, and it sort of goes on from there. So something like that. But and I'm not an expert on Revelations, but doesn't it also say that there are dire things at the end of the world prior to the return of Christ?
Yes. All right. So perfect. That's correct. I'm looking at Grok's AI answer. It says, yes, some Iranian leaders and influential headline figures have explicitly or implicitly endorsed the belief that conflict, chaos, or war, such as the West, US, or Israel, can or must help hasten the return of the 12th Imam. So that's not let's agree. I mean, with Scott's two movies on one screen, I don't know if you feel the same way I feel about what you read, but I feel like it makes the likelihood of what I said kind of like 80% chance.
80% chance of what?
That there are some leaders in Iran who feel as though nuclear war would be a really great thing to usher in paradise.
But again, I'm trying to figure out how this differs, and I'm sure it does, but just, help educate me as if I'm sort of 5 years old. How does this compare to Christian eschatology?
Yeah. So Christian eschatology, by the way, one of the things I respect a lot about you, one of the things I really respect is how much you hate war. So we're not having this conversation from I'm not coming in here hostile. As I understand it, Christian eschatology says in the end days before Christ returns, there will be wars and there will be rumors of wars.
And famines, earthquakes, and plagues, persecution of believers, rise of the Antichrist, cosmic disturbances, sun, moon darkening, stars falling. And so,
100%.
Yeah, it's absolutely
it's
wretched.
Apocalyptic.
And there's the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation explicitly describes enormous loss of life. The four horsemen, conquest, war, famine, and death, bring widespread killing. A third of mankind is killed by the plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur. And there are seals, trumpets, and bowls involving hail and fire, destroying a third of the trees of earth. So seas turning to blood, massive earthquakes, potentially killing. Hang on. Potentially killing billions in total if interpreted literally in a future scenario.
The first scene of Hamlet, they're looking at the stars, everything's collapsing, the world and the politics is coming to an end. Yeah, it's really bad. End times, by definition, is really bad. The Christian understanding is that the bad guys are doing that, and you have to endure and run the race faithfully and wait for Christ to rescue you. It's not you need to get a hold of a nuclear weapon and set it off, because that would be a great way to help all of that happen.
But don't Christians believe that the Jews need to have their homeland in Israel before Christ can return, and they work to try to achieve that, right? Or maintain it?
I have 1,000 problems with the influence of Christian in politics in America, all of that stuff. I'm questioning.
No, hang on. But you can't just skip past that, right? Because if you say, hang on.
It's a deterrent.
Hang on. Let me get a word in edgewise.
Well, you don't care to focus on what I was asking about. I want to know, should our political leaders, as secular as they may be, should they pose as strongly as they can when they enter a negotiation, is all I ask.
Why should you get to dominate the conversation?
I'm not trying to dominate it. You let me ask a question and you want to talk about everything other than that question.
Well, why do you think that everything I'm saying is completely unrelated to your question?
Maybe it's totally related. So let's go down this road.
Thank you. That would be polite. So Christians have...
Actually, I think I'm going to leave. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, I think that's a wise decision. Yeah, so some people just don't want to have a conversation. They want to come in and demand that you address their issues. So in general, Christians believe in end times eschatology, and they believe that they can act to bring about the return of Christ, and they believe that they can make sure that the certain prerequisites are in the world. And I'm not sure, and again, I'm not an expert in either theology, so I don't see a foundational difference. Because if you're going to say people who believe that suffering is necessary to bring about the return of a prophet shouldn't have nuclear weapons, then I'm not sure. And again, I'm happy to be educated, but I'm not sure how it fundamentally differs between Islam and Christianity or any other religion where there's an end times eschatology. And again, if people want to educate me on that, I think that would be great. I would love to be educated on these things and happy to get the answers, right? But when people come into, just as a whole, right? When people come in and ask me a loaded question, do you think we should negotiate from a position of strength? Right? That's sort of what his question was. So that's not a good faith question because it's a trap, right? So does anybody really expect me to say, no, we should negotiate from a position of weakness? I don't like those kinds of questions because they're not intelligent questions, right? So if somebody says to me, I don't let other people set up, and you shouldn't let this, and you shouldn't let me do it either, but you shouldn't let other people set up the boundaries of the discussion, right? It's the old, have you stopped beating your wife is the question. Well, you don't let other people set up the boundaries of your conversation. So if somebody says, as this guy said, well, do you think that we should be negotiating from a position of strength or a position of weakness? That's setting up the boundaries of whether we should be negotiating at all, or whether America or other countries should be negotiating at all. And so if you reject the premise or the limitations of the discussion, you can usually have a much more fruitful decision. But this guy came in hot, wanting to corner me in that I'm either going to say, well, we do have to negotiate, and therefore we should negotiate from a position of strength. Now, if Trump's posturing, let's just sort of take the virtue, morals, ANCAP stuff out of it. If Trump's posturing gets an eschatological end times theocratic regime to give up nuclear weapons, okay, good for him. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. If Trump's posturings end up with a war with people who have weapons of mass destruction, because it's kind of a funny thing. Like everyone thinks that weapons of mass destruction are only nuclear. Only nuclear. Well, unfortunately, and this is not any kind of advocacy, I'm just talking about a basic fact, and I'll get your content in a sec, PJ. But unfortunately, there are many ways to harm people without nuclear weapons, right? I mean, there's infrastructure attacks. There are cyber attacks that can shut down energy grids, either in summer where people die of heat or in winter where people die of cold in many places. There are biological weapons such as COVID. There are lots of things that can be done to harm people outside of nuclear weapons. And nuclear weapons, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to assume that the people who run Iran don't want to die. I'm going to assume that. Now, any country that launched any kind of nuclear weapons would be wiped off the map. Or even if it looked like they were about to. If you could see the covers coming off the whatever ICBMs they would be launching. So any country and any leadership that launched nuclear weapons would be utterly and completely destroyed. And that would be terrible, of course, because there would be nuclear fallout that would go around the world, and it would get into the water table and, all kinds of terrible things. But it would be it would be completely suicidal for the leaders of Iran to launch any kind of nuclear attack. In general, what would be much more likely would be some small or local poison into the water supply, or even a dirty bomb or something like that. And the idea that the only thing that is, or the most dangerous thing would be nuclear is not particularly valid. The other thing, too, which I'm always a little bit confused about, and again, I'm certainly happy to be educated on all of this, is America, over the last 20, 25 years, has allowed 250,000 Iranians to settle in the United States. Now, of course, a lot of those Iranians are nice people who are fleeing a theocratic regime. But can you imagine England in the lead up to World War II allowing millions and millions, right, proportional to the population, allowing millions and millions of Germans, often of military age, fighting males, millions of young German men to come and settle in England in the lead up to World War II? It would seem somewhat unlikely. Now, you could, of course, say, well, a lot of those Germans are anti-national socialist and they want to flee the regime and they want a better life for them and their children. And that would be true of some, but certainly not all. And so one of the things that I find, and again, happy to be educated, but one of the things that I find a little bit confusing is that if Iran is that big of an enemy, why the living hell would you let 250,000 Iranians settle in your country? This makes absolutely no sense to me. If Iran is so dangerous, then why do you let Iranians come to America? And you say, well, but some of them are nice and this. I get all of that. But you don't know who and you don't know to what degree and whatever. Maybe they even come over and they're nice. They get radicalized by something, whatever, right? Or what happens with some totalitarian regimes is people will leave that regime. They will come to the West or something like that, but they've left maybe extended family behind, and the extended family gets threatened if they don't do X, Y, or Z in the West, against the West, on behalf of that regime or something like that. So this is something I've always found to be kind of confusing, that if a regime is so desperately dangerous that you have to threaten war, then why are you letting people in from that country? You kind of have to choose. So I choose when a country says hundreds of thousands of your citizens can come and live here, then I'm going to assume on the basis of that the government or the CIA or whatever it is, the alphabet agencies that deal with foreign threats, that if you are letting hundreds of thousands, often of young military-age men from that regime, come and live in your country, that you don't consider the regime that dangerous. How could you consider the regime that dangerous if you're letting hundreds of thousands of people from that regime come and live in your country? Some of whom you'll give government money to, you'll let them have welfare, right? So if Iran was that dangerous, why would Iranians be living in the United States? Why would the American government let Iranians come and live in the United States? It makes no sense, because the alphabet agencies would say to the government, my gosh, Iran is so full of hatred, the great Satan is so full of hatred towards America that we can't possibly allow Iranians to come and live here, because they could be a fifth column and they could act against us in times of war, and they could be subterfuge, they could be agents against the well-being of America or any place in the West. Now, since America allows, and in fact often encourages, Iranians to come and live in America, then clearly Iran is not that much of a threat. I mean, I'm an empiricist, which means I don't care what people say. I only care what people do. Of course, North Korea, as a communist country, communism is rapidly expansionistic, and communism, at its height, took over a third of the world's surface: the Soviet Union, China, North Vietnam, Cambodia, Korea, North Korea, and other countries. And North Korea is communist, which means violently expansionist, wants to take over the world. It's international communism. And North Korea has nuclear weapons, and nobody's attacking them. And of course, the warnings that Iran is about to get nuclear weapons have been going on since I was, since I was in my 20s for sure. Let's see. Yeah, no, it was since I was in my teens. Yeah, 1985, 1995 for sure. So yeah, in my late 20s. So I had hair when I was first told that Iran was about to get weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons, and so on. And of course, at some point, I think it's fair to say this is kind of like Lucy and Peanuts with the football, over and over again stuff. So I don't think it's out of fear or concern. Now, the other thing too, and this is what I was going to ask this young man who called in, is I was going to ask him which branch of the military he was in that was about to be or was deployed towards Iran. Now, of course, what he was going to say was that he was not in the military, but he encouraged other people spending their lives in pursuit of his beliefs about the dangers of Iran. Now, if you are a young man or young woman, I guess these days, if you were a young man and you were talking about the absolute necessity of going to war with Iran, then I would assume that you would have signed up to go to war with Iran. Because every single person who signs up raises the odds that you can do good things in your mind about taking care of the issue called Iran. And of course, if you are not signed up, then I assume that you don't actually consider it to be that big a deal. I mean, if I was a young man, I used to dream about this when I was a young man. If I was a young man and terrible, horrible invaders were, sort of back in the day, were sort of coming to invade my country, I love my country, then I would sign up to repel them. Of course, right? I mean, I wouldn't leave that to others. I wouldn't let other people do it. So, yes, and so for me, if someone is going to say, I extract principles from conversations, right? I'm a philosopher, which means I talk about principles. I don't talk about instances. In the same way, a physicist doesn't talk about this ball or that ball, it talks about universal principles of gravity or magnetism or that sort of stuff. So mathematician doesn't say that the number 2 only applies to these 2 coconuts, but that the number 2 is an abstraction for a universal. And so, of course, if somebody's going to put forward a moral argument and say that all those leaders who are part of a religion that believes that suffering has to exist before a prophet returns and is willing to do something to ensure their prophet returns should not have nuclear weapons, that is a universal principle. And as a moral philosopher, I have absolutely every right, in fact, I have a professional obligation to ask that basic question. And he says, well, but Christians are more passive about the Revelation's end time stuff. I'm like, but Christians aren't passive. Christians work strenuously to bring about or maintain the preconditions for Jesus's return. So I universalize, and if a moral argument passes the test of universalism, then it might be correct. It might be correct, right? If a scientific theory is at least logically consistent, then it might be valid. If it's not logically consistent, then it's not valid. You don't need to test for anything. If I say I let go of this ball that goes up, down, and sideways, and backwards through time, and forwards through time at the same time, then nobody would need to test that because I'm proposing a contradiction that a ball travel in 2 directions at the same time, which is impossible, of course. So when someone comes to me with a moral argument, I have to universalize it to check for its consistency. And if he says, well, this moral argument only applies to Iran and its leaders, not any other leaders with similar beliefs, then that is not a consistent argument and it has to be rejected. And he has to find some other way to reformulate it. The other question, of course, is should the West be involved in these negotiations at all? And of course, if the belief system of these leaders is so terrifying and so appalling, then why does the West invite anybody with these end times beliefs into their societies at all? And given that the West and the leaders of the West do regularly invite people with these belief systems to come and be a part of their society, how dangerous can these belief systems be? The leaders, I'm not talking about the average person, right? But the leaders constantly invite people with end times theocracies into Western societies and give them money and free stuff and free housing and free healthcare and so on. And so if these end times beliefs are so dangerous, why would Western leaders allow people who hold these beliefs to come in, not Iranians in particular, but anybody who holds these beliefs? Why would they allow them? So the Western leadership does not believe that these beliefs are dangerous. Otherwise, they would not allow people to come into the country with these beliefs. So this is just empirically how I'm working with things. So if that makes sense. All right, we have a caller part 2. And just the other thing too, like if you're going to come in, and it's fine coming in hot, I appreciate the passion and all of that, but if you're going to come in hot, don't attempt to just control the conversation and say, well, you have to answer my question. It's like, no, I really don't. I really don't. I can question the premises of your question, right? Have you stopped beating your wife yet? Well, no, let's hang on. Let's pull back a little because I reject the premise. But you haven't answered my question. And if you're going to come in hot, which is fine, again, I appreciate the passion, then don't bitch out. Don't punk out when you get cross-examined. Don't come out when you hit some skepticism, right? That's just kind of childish, right? All right. PJ, if you wanted to, what are we having a sleepover here?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Steven, I'm coming in hot.
All right.
No, I'm kidding. But I just wanted to say I actually was in the Air Force, and I don't think we should be in Iran at all. And I was in Kuwait for about 6 months. So just my lowly opinion there.
Well, tell me, well, first of all, I don't think America's in Iran at the moment, but tell me more about your thoughts.
Well, I just don't think it's not really like a big moral thing. It's just personally, people I know would have to go over there, and there would be a lot of stuff that I would have to do. It's not like a really brave opinion of me to have, but I just don't want to be over there because it entangles us, and me, and I guess more personal ways, it entangles us over there, and I don't want to be over there.
So it is always, of course, the question, what happens after regime change, right? So, of course, if you look at the takedown of Gaddafi by Hillary Clinton in Libya, Libya was a fairly well-functioning society, obviously not with belief systems that I would particularly adhere to, but it was a relatively stable and functioning society with infrastructure and redistribution and education and a tax system and all of that. And I personally think that Libya had to be taken out to ensure that lots of people could pour into Europe. That's a whole sort of different topic. But nonetheless, you take out Gaddafi, and what happens? So what do you do after the regime change? This is sort of to perhaps trivialize it a little bit. This is one of the things I love about the book The Hobbit, which is they kill the dragon, and then what? Well, then there's the Battle of the Five Armies over the dragon's treasure. So after you take out a regime, after you take out the leadership, then what? And of course, as we know, the former Libya, right, the country formerly known as Libya, has descended into warlord violence and open air slave markets where you can buy human beings for $400 and just a general mess as a whole. So if you look at, of course, the 20 years or so that America was in Iraq, spent trillions of dollars to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And so what do you do afterwards? And Iran, of course, is much larger. Iran is very mountainous, much like Afghanistan, and therefore it's very tough to wage war as a whole. And it is very tough to wage war without, and you correct me, of course, you were actually in the military, so correct me where I go astray. But I think it's very hard to wage war unless you're all in, unless you are willing to sort of hold your nose, put your ethics to the side, and just do whatever it takes to win the war. Going into a war halfway, this is sort of the Vietnam issue, where there were bureaucrats overseeing every single decision that was trying to be made on the ground. And because the media was in that war, and of course the media was pro-communist and anti-American, and therefore they portrayed the war as in as hostile a manner as possible towards America, and that gave Americans hesitation regarding what was necessary to win that war. And so to me, if the American public is not 150% behind it, and if the American public, because what will happen in the war, if possible, and I know that this is sort of being discouraged by the U.S. after their experience, the U.S. military after their experience in Vietnam, but if the American population is so behind the war, again, we're not talking morals, we're just talking PR. If the American population is so behind the war that if they see children being killed in the war, then they will say, well, that's the price you pay for messing with us, or FAFO, or something like that, right? But if, Europe opened up its borders because one little kid drowned on the beach in Turkey, I think, a Turkish kid. No, in the Mediterranean. And of course, it was a father who was overloading a boat to go. I think he wanted to go to Canada to get free dental care or something. It was completely terrible, right? And so you should blame the parent, but instead right? So if there's too much sentimentality, which often means too much female influence, then what happens is the way that you have the worst outcome is you start waging the war, and then all of these terrible images come flowing over the wire and make all the women's ovaries twitch, and the women are like, "Oh, this is terrible. Can we just do it without hurting anyone?" And then you get this paralysis, and this politicians are portrayed as cruel and heartless, and it actually just gets more people killed and has the war go on and on and on. So unless you're willing to wage total war, you don't go to war at all. And I don't think that there's the kind of momentum in America or in the West as a whole that will have a total war be waged. And I think there'll be all these hesitations, and I think it will probably turn out badly as a whole if it indeed goes forward. Does that accord with your understanding? Do you think something different? Or have you left us completely?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess because I think it would maybe like an operation would work, but like if we went and totally declared war, then you would have to go all in. But even then, like the whole Iraq war, like we still called that an operation. We were there 20, 30 years, still kind of there.
Yeah.
So I don't think like once you dip your toe in, you can't really stop. Or not me, or you, but the leadership can't really stop themselves from the entanglements that just naturally occur. Because they don't have a plan after the regime change that is like long term and fits for the people.
Well, and of course, since the late 1970s, when the Ayatollahs took over, there have now been generations of people who've been raised in this particular ideology, and they're going to continue in that particular ideology. They're going to try and fight back. So what do you do in the long run? What do you do when smog is down?
Right. That's like what a lot of people on X, and maybe that's just their opinion, but they say like, well, what did you expect to happen when you invaded countries that didn't want you there? Like they weren't going to invade back is like kind of their argument for immigration. But like it just makes me want to pull everything out of every like foreign entanglement. I just want to get out. Me personally, it's not really up to me. So whether or not I actually go over there isn't entirely up to my decision. But that's why doubly, because I don't have a choice whether or not I go over there. I definitely don't want to be entangled in that.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate your feedback, and I just checked, and it looks like all the embassies in the Middle East are having their personnel withdrawn. And again, whether that's because the war is imminent or whether it's a last-ditch attempt to get some concessions is hard to say.
Right.
But mostly the
question.
leaders. Yeah. So this guy was saying that the first caller was saying that the leaders in Iran want this end time stuff. But in general, political leaders they don't like to do this themselves. Right? The political leaders like other people to suffer, not themselves. And the people who declare war are not the people who go to war. And where you have suicide bombers, it generally is the leadership that encourages it, but not. They don't do it themselves, right? And so leaders don't want to die in their war. And if they were to launch any kind of weapons of mass destruction from Iran, the leadership would die.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Anything else you wanted to mention?
Yes. I was in a discussion group at my school pretty recently, and I was talking to them a little bit about like what a libertarian belief is, because I lean libertarian. And they asked me if I would support kids transitioning. And obviously, I don't support that. But I realized that I couldn't find a way to explain that kids don't have the moral decision making to transition themselves, while also covering the fact that they can choose, to leave their families to escape their abusive households. And I wasn't able to communicate that very well. But obviously, I felt that there's a way that you can meld those two beliefs. I wasn't able to explain it, but if you have a better way of communicating that, um, I'd like to hear it.
So when you say that children should have the right to leave abusive families, does that mean that children should report their abusive families and then have the option to go to a foster family or a home or something like that?
Yes, something like that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that would be to remove a negative that is directly harming them without altering their physiology in any way.
And okay, I see. And transitioning would be a positive affect uh, that would change their physiology. But the
Yes.
difference is that I guess you can walk back, like whether or not a child can, unentangle themselves from their family by being like, okay, well, it looks like they want to make concessions and they really apologized, or maybe the kid wasn't, fully aware of the choice that he was making, and you can walk that back, but you kind of really can't with the gender transition.
Well, and I would also say, yeah, you're right. The parents can go to therapy. The parents can become better at parenting and so on. But yeah, it's a bit of a one-way street. All right. Is there anything else?
No, that was all. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
man. Appreciate the question and appreciate the conversations. All right. Esoteric. What is on your mind? Feel free to speak on this or any other topic that you like.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to call in because I saw your tweet earlier about basically how Christians are to blame, or I think it was Christians or Christian Zionists was the term. I can't
No,
remember
I said Christian
exactly.
fundamentalists.
Christian fundamentalists, yeah. And I think it's just important to distinguish between, because I think you're an agnostic, right?
Atheist.
Oh, full on atheist? Nice. So I don't know how familiar you are with this concept or not, but um, Christian Zionism and specifically dispensationalism, which is at the root of all of the kind of end times eschatology that you're talking about when you talk about fundamental Christians, is pretty much a uniquely American phenomenon. Um,
Well, I was talking
like,
about America because it's America that's going to war. So I wasn't talking about Christians in Nigeria.
right, right. I wanted like other people that I didn't know how familiar you were with it or not, but I just wanted other people that saw that tweet. It's like it's not Christians per se. It's American Christians because we've been psyoped. American Christians have been psyoped by this movement called dispensationalism, and that really is a pretty new thing. Even speaking about that, that's only we're going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s that concept was even invented. There's almost 2,000 years of Christianity before that where nobody and that called themselves Christian believed that. But I think it's interesting if you go and look in the history of how this concept came to be and came to be so widespread in American Christianity, it actually coincides with pretty closely with the beginning of the Jewish Zionist movement. And there's a lot of people that have speculated that um, the what was the name of the Bible that there was this study Bible that came out. The Schofield Reference Bible is what it's called. And there's a lot of people that have speculated that might have even been funded by Jewish Zionists in order to basically psyop American Christians into supporting the state of quote Israel.
Well,
Um,
okay, and I don't obviously know much about that or anything really, but what I will
yeah,
say is, let's say that there was some kind of psyop. I mean, everybody's making arguments for their own self-interest all the time. And the question is, are Christians, let's say that they were psyoped, are Christians still responsible for that? Because psyop doesn't, I mean, we're all persuaded, right? We're all, I mean, if a friend of mine, sorry to trivialize it, but if a friend of mine, as they did when I was a teenager, said, hey man, you should try this joint or you should try this drug or take this pill or something like that. I mean, I'm still responsible for saying yes or no, right? So the psyop,
100%.
yeah, the psyop, whatever you're talking about, if it is some sort of psyop, the way that I would frame it is, okay, so various interest groups are fighting for their own particular preferences and goals. And if it fits into the framework of Christianity and people believe it based upon Christianity, then Christianity as a whole is at fault. So there would be no psyop that would say, well, we have to convince Christians that Christ was not divine. Would that psyop ever work?
Well, that's actually one of the earliest Christian heresies that came up, was basically Gnostic Christianity, which said, which tried to make that distinction. So some people have
No,
tried to
but
make that.
in
But
modern
I
Christianity,
understand your point. I
sorry to
understand
interrupt.
your point.
In modern Christianity, could there ever be a psyop that would ever be successful to convince Christians that Jesus was not the Son of God?
Yeah, probably not.
No, come on, that would never happen. Like you would be in a sense laughed out of the church, because the entire foundation of Christianity is that Jesus is the Son of God and has omniscience and is infallible because of his divine nature and is not subject to sin and is the only perfect human being / God who ever existed. And I'm probably butchering some theology here, but from what I recall, you can't have Christianity if Jesus was just a really good teacher with some cool ideas, right? So Christianity rests upon Jesus's divinity, and therefore a psyop that would be to try to say, or a persuasion matrix that would try to say to Christians, Jesus was just a dude with some great ideas, that would be rejected. So whatever you did, I think it was Scofield Bible or something that you'd mentioned. So if that fits into the framework of Christianity to the point where hundreds of millions of Christians, or tens of millions at least, fully accept and believe it, then that is a weakness within Christianity because it can be used in this kind of way.
Well, and I totally agree with what you're saying, and that's the shame of it all, and is that it really is closer to like tens of millions. Like, it's such a small number of Christians when you're considering the total amount of Christians throughout the world, because you got to think about, whatever it is, 1 point something billion Catholics, they don't believe in this shit. The Orthodox, they don't believe in this shit. It's just this subset of American Christians that have been brainwashed. And
well,
it's
no,
kind
hang on. So you've replaced psyop with brainwashed.
Well,
but it does fit.
I mean it the same way.
There are justifications that are used within Christianity for this perspective, and this is one of the reasons why I prefer philosophy to religion. Is that, as you know, and I'm not sure what your religious beliefs are. I assume not super Christian if you said cool for me being an atheist, but there is a lot of ambiguous language in the Bible. And of course, the most common example would be something like, spare the rod, spoil the child. A lot of Christians believe that means you should hit your children or beat your children with implements in order to bring them closer to God. And spare the rod, spoil the child is something that is grasped onto by violent parents to justify their violence and say that they are bringing their children to the high, thorny, holy path to heaven. Whereas, of course, the general interpretation, if you look at the original text, is that the staff was a shepherd's staff, which is used for guiding and so on, not used for beating sheep. In other words, if you spare your children moral guidance, you will spoil them, which I would agree with as well. So the problem is that religion has ambiguous language, usually by design, because religion wants to appeal to as many people as possible. So if you had a religion that preached gentle reasoning with children, then people who were very aggressive and violent parents, abusive parents, I would say, would not want to be part of that religion. If you had a purely aggressive, beat your children with sticks religion, then the more peaceful and reasonable parents would not want to be part of that religion. So religion generally tends to morph into providing the most benefit to the most perspectives. So if you are very aggressive, you tend to be more Old Testament. And if you are less aggressive, you tend to be more New Testament, right? It's the old, if you're aggressive, then it's an eye for an eye. which is generally more of a male perspective. If you are more peaceful or more frightened or have less power or lower T, then you are turn the other cheek, right? So it has both within it to appeal to both people. So the problem is that religion, and the most successful religions tend to do this the most, it tends to morph into whatever your personality structure is, or whatever your innate beliefs tend to be, or your innate emotional preferences. You can find justification for it in the ambiguous language of religion, but that's not how philosophy works. So philosophy can't be psyoped if it's rational, empirical philosophy. If it's made up, then it's just another form of mystery religion. And so I prefer philosophy because philosophy can't just be, it doesn't put out ambiguous language that appeals to just about everyone and tends to enhance people's personalities to the point where they unite their personal preferences with the divine. Because if you're an aggressive person and you take things in the Bible as the most aggressive statements, that you then say, well, my aggression is now divine, and that means it's kind of not open to question, when I think just about every perspective should be open to question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's so funny you make that point about the ambiguity of different passages of scripture, because I know you're not familiar with Christianity or whatever, but even within the New Testament, there's a section in the gospel where Jesus is taken out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and he's tempted by the devil. And the devil uses scripture to try and get Jesus to jump off a cliff, but he uses scripture. And it's so funny that almost that whole concept of the ambiguity is even within scripture itself. Like Satan is using scripture to try and get Jesus basically to commit suicide.
Yeah,
He
because
uses
he
a
says to
passage of
Jesus,
scripture.
if you really trust in faith in God, then you can jump off the cliff and God will have you not fall, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate that. Appreciate the questions, and let us move on. I think we've chatted with our good friend Tyrone before. And Tyrone, what is on your mind, my friend? Going once, going twice.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, Stefan. Well, one of the areas where I disagree with you is rape being a net that negative.
All right. Let's. I said all questions are welcome, so let's do it.
All right, so I'm black, so I rape all the white women on Earth, and they all like it.
All right. Excellent. Good job. I think we will not. That's a bit too obvious of trolling. All right. Slightly right. If you have a thought, a comment, a criticism, whatever is on your mind.
All right, I wanted to touch on a couple topics that you guys touched on regarding Iran, and then the one person asked about transitioning for children.
Sorry, just a
Also,
second. You wouldn't happen to have a slightly better microphone? You're kind of a headset or anything like that.
Is this better? Is that better?
I'm sorry?
Is this better?
Yeah, it's much better. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay. So I wanted to touch on a couple topics. You guys were talking about Iran, and then the same person you had on was talking about transitioning. So I wanted to touch on both of those. First, when it comes to Iran, there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance when it comes to that. So I tend to be more deontological. I
Okay,
tend not
define
to
your
agree
terms,
with a
please.
lot of.
Define your terms. Remember, we're talking to a general layperson audience, so don't use $20 words without defining them.
So I typically don't believe that the ends justify the means. I know most people have heard about the trolley problem. I don't typically believe that the ends justify the means, that to achieve an end, you must engage in moral acts to achieve a moral end. I don't believe that it's generally, I don't believe that it's moral to engage in immoral acts to achieve a moral good. So
Okay,
that's
got
what I
it.
mean
Thank
by
you. Sorry, go ahead.
Um, whereas the opposite of that is utilitarian. Typically, people with utilitarian beliefs agree that you can commit immoral acts to achieve a moral good. And when it comes to Iran, I tend to look at it the way that I look at self-defense in this country. Um, the use of deadly defensive force. If someone actively poses a threat of great bodily harm or death to you or to another, you have the you should have the moral right to use deadly force to defend yourself or another. Um, at the end of the day, if I think it boils down to whether or not you trust your government. If you trust your government and they tell you this group or this country poses an imminent deadly threat, then I believe that there is moral justification for eradicating that threat by any means. Um, you shouldn't wait to get shot before you shoot at someone that's posing a threat to you, which is the same standard we use here for self defense in most states.
Okay. Is there more that you wanted to mention? I mean, I certainly have some thoughts about that, but I want to make sure you get your thoughts out.
No, I'd like to hear your thought on that.
All right. So an individual can use violence in self-defense, and that's perfectly morally justified in my argument and perspective, and I think rationally so. I've got a whole section on self-defense in my book on ethics, universally preferable behavior, a rational proof of secular ethics, available for free at freedomain.com/books. You should check it out. So yes, individuals can absolutely use violence for imminent grievous bodily harm or death. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, the standard of imminent grievous bodily harm or death has to be adjudicated in a court, right?
Actually, not. So it depends on the state. So
No,
in
no,
a
we're
lot
talking.
of
No, no, we're talking about individuals.
yes, yeah, and it depends on the state.
No, but in general, if somebody says, I shot that guy because he was running at me with an axe,
Right.
right? Then you would need some evidence that the guy was running at you with an axe, right?
No, in some states it's an affirmative defense. The state has to disprove self-defense rather than you being forced to prove it. So in my state of Florida, if someone's attacking me and I use deadly defensive force, and I claim that I was acting in self-defense, that I had a reasonable fear of death or bodily injury or serious bodily injury, it would be the state would bear the burden of proving that was not true. I would not have to prove that it was.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about, though, but I appreciate the clarification. So the first thing you said was, if someone's attacking me.
Right.
Okay, so you have to prove that someone was attacking you.
Well, again, no.
Yes.
You have to. Well,
absolutely.
You don't have
I can't go and shoot someone in Florida in their sleep and say, well, I thought they were attacking me. There has to be some evidence that the person was attacking you.
So here's the standard. They don't even have to attack you. You have to be in reasonable fear that they are going to attack you.
Okay, so there has to be some reasonable fear that has to be adjudicated.
Yeah. The standard is what a reasonable person would believe or fear. But again, you don't have to prove that. The state has to disprove that.
Okay, let's say that I'm in a bar, and listen, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just talking about this philosophically, right? But I'm sure that this is the case. So if I'm in a bar and somebody walks too fast and clips me with their shoulder, can I shoot them?
Legally, I don't believe that would rise to legal self-defense.
No, it wouldn't. Come on. If somebody, because if somebody, hang on, if somebody bumps into three people, maybe they're a little drunk and they're weaving and they bump into me, I don't get to blow them away, right?
No, of course. You would probably get convicted. But again, the burden is not on you. The burden is on the state to disprove your claim of self-defense.
Well, no, not always. Not
in the
always.
State of Florida?
No, not always. And listen, again, I'm no lawyer, but I can't just claim that I shot someone based on self-defense. There has to be some evidence of aggression on the part of another person. Like, I can't walk down the street, shoot some guy and said, well, I thought he was going to attack me.
You can make that claim, yes.
Well, of course, you can make your claim about anything, But if there's no evidence that the guy was going to attack me, then I would be convicted of homicide, of murder.
More than likely, yes. But again, in Florida, I know this is blowing your mind, but in Florida, and among other states, the claim is an affirmative one where you do not have to prove anything. You do not have to prove aggression. You do not have to prove that the person acted aggressively towards you or posed a risk or a threat to you. The state must disprove that they did.
Okay, I don't believe you, and I'm not saying that you're lying, but I just cannot imagine. Now, I think what you're talking about, and I'll check this, but I think what you're talking about is subjective perception of imminent danger. In other words, if some guy is very aggressive towards you and he's like threatening you or whatever, and you shoot him or you use self-defense in some manner, then there's no way to objectively prove whether or not you feared imminent bodily harm or death. So that is accepted if someone is already acting aggressively towards you, but you still have to prove that somebody was acting aggressively towards you. You just don't have to prove the degree to which objectively you feared imminent bodily harm or death, which would be impossible to prove in many cases anyway.
Again, you don't have to prove that. Not in this state.
All right, let me check it. And again, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying I'm having a tough time believing it, which could be my limitation. Okay, tell me about the burden of proof in using violence in self-defense in Florida. Is that a fair way to put it?
Deadly defensive force is how I would
And using
phrase it.
deadly defensive force. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. In Florida. Or Florida. All right. Maybe you're totally right, and in which case I'm right. Okay. Stand your ground. Yeah, that makes sense. A person is justified in using, again, none of this is legal advice. This is just AI. So none of this is legal advice. None of this is, nobody here is a lawyer. So consult with a lawyer. Don't take anything I'm saying as any kind of legal advice. All right. A person is justified in using or threatening deadly force if they reasonably believe it is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to themselves or another person, or the imminent commission of a forcible felony, robbery, aggravated battery, sexual battery, kidnapping, burglary with assault. The person is not engaged in criminal activity at the time. They're in the place with the right to be, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Florida has no duty to retreat. Yeah, that's fine. This is an affirmative self-defense. If someone uses deadly force and is charged with murder, manslaughter, they can claim it was justified self-defense. Florida's law provides strong protections through a pretrial immunity hearing mechanism. The defendant must first raise the self-defense claim and present a prima facie case, basic initial evidence showing they qualify for immunity. Yeah. So they have to provide testimony, witnesses, video, or other evidence suggesting reasonable fear of imminent harm and no aggression on their part. So that's what I'm talking about. You have to present a prima facie case, basic initial evidence, showing they qualify for immunity. So they have to prove that there was some evidence suggesting reasonable fear of imminent harm and no aggression on their part, right? You can't go up and start strangling with someone and then get mad if they fight back, right?
No, of course not, because then you're not engaging in self-defense.
So once this prima facie claim is raised at the pretrial hearing before a judge, not a jury, the burden shifts to the prosecution. So, yeah, so if you're saying, look, I've got video, the guy just started beating me up for no reason in the bar, so I shot him, or whatever, right? Like whatever, I don't know, like some sort of, but there has to be some evidence that you have to provide showing that you qualify for this immunity. Witnesses, video, testimony, any kind of evidence on your part, right? And
Yeah,
so
well,
if you once you make this claim, the burden shifts to the prosecution. The state must then prove by clear and convincing evidence that the use of force was not justified, that immunity does not imply, such as proving the defendant was the aggressor, the threat wasn't imminent, the force was disproportionate, or other disqualifying factors. So I think that we are, in a sense, both right in that you're right that the burden of proof is on the prosecution, but only once the defendant has raised the self-defense claim and presented a basic initial evidence case that they qualify for immunity. So if the defendant has witnesses that said this guy, all he did was brush past him, and then they bumped him with his shoulder, and then the guy started beating the hell out of him, and you've got 5 witnesses that say that, then the state has to prove, in order to move forward, the state has to prove that your immunity, self-defense, does not apply. But you still have to provide evidence to show that you qualify for immunity based on self-defense.
Right. Well, without getting into the weeds too much, testimony alone is evidence. It just ultimately it depends on the judge whether they accept testimony alone.
Sure. No, I said that. E.g., testimony, witnesses, video, or other evidence. So yes, I agree.
I'm saying just your own testimony is sufficient in that instance.
No,
Legally
that's again. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think. Hang on. I don't think that if it's just you and the guy, and there's no evidence, like he doesn't have a gun, he doesn't have any bruises on his knuckles, there's no evidence whatsoever that he did any kind of aggression, and you just shot him, then I don't think you saying, I thought he was going to hit me, is enough. Because then you would just lure someone to a lonely place, you'd shoot him, and then you would say, well, I thought he was going to be aggressive. And if your own testimony was enough, then nobody could ever be convicted of murder if there was no one else around.
I mean, it's happened. It's definitely happened.
Well, anything happens under the law, but we're talking about the general principle.
So I'm talking about cases being dismissed for testimony alone. But the basic premise why I compare it to that is if we have credible evidence or credible intelligence that a nation like Iran poses an immediate threat to a specific target or to targets, that we are justified morally in a preemptive strike to prevent that action from occurring.
All right. Okay, the defendant needs to allege and provide some evidence of facts showing they acted in justifiable self-defense. So you first of all need to claim self-defense, and then you need to provide some evidence. Because if anyone then, and you understand, legally anyone could claim that they felt in danger and therefore could shoot someone, and if their own testimony was enough, then almost nobody could be convicted. So you do have to provide, of course, you put your own testimony or affidavit forward, witness statements or testimony, physical evidence, video footage, photos, 911 calls, injuries, forensic reports, scene reconstruction, expert testimony, any uncontested or supporting facts that align with the elements of justified force. So I don't believe, and again, I'm no lawyer, but I don't believe that you just saying, like if you're with some guy in the middle of a field and there's no one around and you shoot him, and then you say, no, I thought he was going to aggress against me or I felt in fear of my life, I don't know that would be enough. If there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever, I don't know that would be enough. But anyway, let's just leave that to one side because, again, neither of us are lawyers. But certainly when it comes to a rational law, you can't just say that I thought he was dangerous, so I shot him, and then off you go. You're fine, right? So I don't think that would be. I think there would need to be some additional evidence. Okay, so we're talking about individuals, and then we move things to governments, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then your argument is that if you trust your government and the government says this country on the other side of the world is very dangerous to us and therefore we need to invade this country, then the question is whether you trust the government, right?
So not necessarily that they're dangerous to us, but there is actionable intelligence that is that points to a specific planned attack or something like that.
That would be imminently dangerous, right? So let's say that there's a country, well, let's say it's Iran, right? So let's say that Iran, you come across that they're going to attack on next Tuesday, right? And this is signed by the highest person in the land and so on, right?
Right.
Okay. So yes, I mean, if you have evidence that another country is going to attack your country, and I think UN and international law accepts this, that if you have good reason to believe that the country, the foreign country, is about to attack your country, then yes, preemptive. If the army is gathering on your borders, then you don't have to wait for a declaration of war or for the army to cross your borders or something like that. So if you have clear and convincing proof, again, I'm just talking morally, I'm not a lawyer, right, or international law, but if you have clear and convincing proof that another country is about to attack your country, then a preemptive strike would be morally justified.
I would go a little bit beyond that. When it comes to the proliferation of nuclear weaponry with Iran, I think Iran has made quite clear that once they obtain nuclear weaponry, or at least weaponry that can be used against us, whether it's ICBMs or drones or what have you, um, they've made it quite clear that they would use that weaponry against us. I think once we have intelligence that they have acquired nuclear weapons that can be used against us, I think that also would allow for preemptive action, because at the end of the day, when you're in a fight, whether it be a war or a street fight, typically whoever strikes first is the winner, so to speak, in that altercation.
Okay, so what threats has Iran issued against the United States?
I wouldn't say they've issued, at least not the government, has issued a direct threat. At least not in the not recently, I don't believe.
Okay, have they threatened the U.S. homeland?
That's again, it depends on what you mean by have they threatened us.
Well, not really.
They're chartered.
Yeah, not really.
Well,
So, in general, sorry to interrupt. So, in general, the threats that Iran has issued against the U.S. tend to be defensive and retaliatory in nature. So they say, if you attack us, right, and they tend to focus or target their threats against U.S. military assets in the Middle East rather than any direct attacks on American soil directly.
I think that's more because of what their capabilities are at the moment. I don't doubt if they were capable of attacking the continental U.S. that they would.
Okay, so what would happen if they attacked the continental U.S. with some weapon of mass destruction? What would happen to Iran?
I think that would probably be eradicated.
Right. So why would they do that?
Well, why would jihadists get in? Why would they take over planes and kamikaze them into the World Trade Centers?
Well, hang on, but this is a bit of a different matter, because the extremists in that way are not long-term political leaders.
Well, I disagree. The ones that actually carry out the attacks, no. But the ones that orchestrate them and fund them are most certainly political leaders.
Well, yes, but those political leaders aren't dying in those attacks. Whereas if Iranian political leaders attacked America directly, then they would die in the attack.
Yeah, I don't think that is going to make a difference when the government is orchestrating the attacks. They're ultimately responsible for those attacks.
I don't understand what you mean.
So it doesn't matter whether Iranian leaders are actually flying planes or crossing over the Atlantic to attack us. If they are responsible for the organization and funding of those attacks.
No, sorry.
Regardless.
Sorry. If Iran attacked America, you said Iran would be wiped out.
Yes.
Okay. So that means that the Iranian leadership would die and would no longer be in charge of the smoking crater formerly known as Iran, right?
Correct.
Okay. So why would political leaders who obviously enjoy having political power and being in charge of a nation, why would they do something that would destroy themselves and their nation?
I think that the people that are in charge currently in Iran, I think they still have the ideology that doing so would make them a martyr for the Islamic cause.
Yes, but they haven't done any of that. for
I-
for decades and decades and decades. So
because they haven't been capable of doing that. I don't
no,
believe.
they have absolutely been capable of attacking America. Of course they have. I mean, as I said earlier, 250,000 Iranians have settled in America. They could be any number of those that would be funded and trained by the regime to do harm to America.
And yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I think I would I would I would wager that the vast majority of them are probably anti-Iranian.
Yes, but not all of
At
them.
least,
I mean, if the Iranian
no, of course
government,
not.
if the Iranian government wanted to smuggle some people into the U.S. to do harm to the U.S., they absolutely could have done it. I mean, the borders have been open since 2020, at least until Trump, or any one of the number of people they could have got the right paperwork and had people come across and right. So I'm just saying that they absolutely could have attacked the homeland if they wanted, because America's an open society. It's kind of tough to go and attack North Korea because it's a closed society, but America's an open society. You can fly in anytime.
Yeah, I don't know that that Iran. I think if they were to attack the U.S. mainland, they would want to do it in a way much greater than a bunch of Iranian citizens that they've smuggled over here, committing small acts of terrorism around the
Well, no, they
country.
could be
I
very
think it would
large
be
acts
something
of
like that.
terrorism. Hang on, they could be very
Well,
large. And again, none of this is suggested. It's just we're analyzing it from that
oh, of course.
standpoint. Okay, let me ask you a different question. So,
Okay.
if the government claims that they have evidence of a foreign country about to attack with weapons of mass destruction, and it turns out that the people in charge or the people who make those claims are wrong, what should the punishment be, if any?
For those politicians that are wrong,
Well, the politicians, the leaders of whoever, like the intelligence agencies or whatever. So if they say, we have certain evidence of this imminent attack, and it turns out that they don't, what, if any, punishment should there be for those leaders or those intelligence experts?
if if they're if they know that they are wrong and they are making
No,
these
if they put it
claims,
forward as a certainty and they don't have certainty. I don't know whether they know that, it's reading people's minds, whether they know they're wrong or not. If they say, we have absolute certainty about this attack, and it turns out they don't have absolute certainty about this attack, this comes out after the war, say, what should the punishment be for the political leaders and the intelligence experts who make this claim? This is not particular to America. This is anywhere.
no, of course. Then at that point, I think that they would need to go in front of like the UN Council or something.
No, it would have to be domestic because it's the country that they had on the path to war.
Well, I mean, you have people that have warrants for crimes internationally. Um,
Okay,
so
I'm a
I
little,
mean,
I'm a little confused here. So if you attack someone and kill them, and you
Right.
claim self-defense, but it turns out it wasn't self-defense, what happens?
oh, do you get convicted?
Well, you'd go to a trial, and if you're convicted,
Yeah, of course.
what happens?
It depends on the state. Either you'd probably get life in prison, you get the death penalty, or you'd get a couple decades in prison. It just depends on the state.
Is war worse than the murder of an individual?
No, absolutely.
Okay, so what punishment should there be to leaders who lie any country into a war?
If they lie a country into war, then they should. I think at the minimum they should be locked up for the rest of their life.
Okay, so has this ever occurred in the history of the world
Absolutely.
where leaders who lie their countries into war, well, I suppose you could say, yeah, Nazi Germany and things like that. Has it ever happened in a Western country outside of Germany with the Nuremberg, which was kind of the first of its kind? Did it happen, for instance, with the Iraq War in 2003?
Oh, most definitely.
What happened?
There were no weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, no, I get that. And what was the punishment to people who claimed that they had certain knowledge of weapons of mass destruction when it turned out there weren't any weapons of mass destruction?
There wasn't a punishment, which is a major flaw, and our country should have done better than that.
Okay. Now, what about the people who claimed that they could fix Afghanistan because Afghanistan was ruled by the Taliban, which was really bad, and then they left a whole bunch of military equipment behind and armed the Taliban.
That's treason, in my opinion.
Okay. So have leaders as a whole, when they claim to be able to achieve a positive outcome or at least avoid a negative outcome, if they're unable to maintain or fulfill their promises, do they ever get punished?
No, unfortunately, they don't. Typically, they do not.
So what would be the incentive then for people to not lie if they face not only zero punishments, but they continue to wield power, they get all their pensions, they get book deals, they get speaking tours, they do very well out of this. So what would be the incentive? What incentive would they have to not lie if they receive no punishment for lying? Are you still with me? Well, so, okay. I think asked and answered. All right. Geezy, what is on your mind? Easy. There's a little apostrophe there.
But yeah, Stefan. So I would say the trial of Travis Stackhouse, he should definitely be free.
Can
He
you
was
get me up
charged
to
with
speed on
murder.
that?
Oh yeah, he was convicted of killing his son over a slice of cheesecake.
Go on. You're right. In June 2019, Stackhouse, then around 29 years old, became angry after his young son ate some of a Father's Day cheesecake that Stackhouse had reserved for himself. He fatally punched or struck the child in anger, causing severe injuries that led to the boy's death. After the incident, Stackhouse reportedly left the home to go to a bar until around 2 a.m., and his girlfriend later called 911 when the child was unresponsive. Wow, that's horrendous. So, all right, I'm going to assume that this is another troll, but
Wait, he was
interesting. All right, Richard. Don't be a dick. What is your information? What is your question? What is your comment?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
How's it going, Stefan?
Good. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm not sure. Do you remember me, or I think the podcast number was 6209.
Your voice seems familiar, so nice to chat with you again. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Anyway, well, I got a couple of things to say actually. One of them quite humorous. I think you'll like it. With respect to the previous call-ins, all about Islam and all the rest of it. Yeah, for sure. But I honestly, I feel like communism by far is the greatest threat that we face. And we don't just face it like from a different geographical area. It's, pretty much Canada is kind of fully taken at this point, I guess. So, and I feel like, these other things, yeah, for sure they're important, but the real threat I believe, is communism right at home. That is actually a very, very serious threat, I believe. I don't know what your thoughts are there on that.
Well, so communism has taken over the West a century and a half ago, I would argue.
For sure.
Right,
Yeah.
because the moment that you turn the education of your children over to the government, you lose all connection to sustainable liberty. And if we're going to say, well, see, we've got to take, right, from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. If we're going to take, really the most important thing that society does is educate children. Because the only reason we accumulate culture is to pass it along to our children, the values, the sacrifice of our ancestors, the continuity of our civilization is all dependent upon the moral and virtuous education of children. And if, which happened in the mid-19th century, late 19th century, depending on where you look in the West, if 100 to 150 years ago, we said, well, the most important aspect of civilization should be turned over to communism, to collectivism, to socialism, whatever you want to say, to force, to taking people's taxes by force and then turning over the education of children to the government. If we say the most essential, sensitive, moral, and delicate mission of society can only be handled by the government, what the hell else are we supposed to say? Like, what are we supposed to reserve for freedom if we turn over the education of children to the government, to force, then, which inevitably becomes indoctrination? So, unfortunately, the decisions or the issues or the mistakes that were made in the past happened many generations before you and I were born. The betrayal, the tragedy, the turning over of children to the giant Pac-Man blood-soaked maw of the state occurred 150 years ago. Demographic change began in the 60s, and we were all just trying to survive these falling meteors of prior bad decisions. And until people can confront that kind of stuff and say the decisions that were bad started a long, long time ago, and undoing them is going to be a challenge, then I don't know. I mean, because of course, when the government controls education, then people who want to control the population just take over the government education system, write all of the Howard Zinn textbooks and set up the educational curricula, and there's no competition in particular other than homeschooling, which is dicey and certainly illegal in some places in Europe. So I agree with you that communism is a big and dangerous challenge. The problem, of course, is that the communists control education from kindergarten all the way through to postgrad. And at least we do have the internet to try and do some deprogramming of this collectivist cult, but it's a pretty slow and brutal process. And there's the world is making people crazy a lot faster than you and I can make them sane. And unfortunately, it's just a bit of a losing numbers game.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, on a lighter note, I listened to your podcast the other day when you had your daughter applying makeup to your face.
Yes. And and now I come across drag queens and say, well, why couldn't you make me look like that? She's gorgeous. Anyway, go on.
Anyway, first of all, I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though it was like audio only. Oh my God.
Well, it actually wasn't audio only. You just chose to listen to it rather than watch it, but go on.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay. Fair criticism, absolutely. But anyway, I was just like, oh my God, I was laughing so hard, my stomach hurt. And it's like, oh my God, that was I mean, it's so unexpected because you're pretty sober minded and whatever you want to call it. But when this podcast started, I was just like, oh my God, he
He
was
can't
so
be doing
awesome.
that. Who's
It
the
was
evil
so-
twin who took over this show?
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so maybe now that I see you live on X, this is the first time I've been on X for a long time. And I thought, well, okay, give it a shot. Because last time we spoke, the tech was interrupting our conversation so often that it was kind of very difficult. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that, maybe now I'm looking at you live, I'm thinking maybe Izzy should be sort of like making you up before you make a public appearance.
That's right. She can be my my touring drag queen applicator with a roller paint and a face bomb. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and I did have quite a blast doing that. I was surprised. I thought it was going to be a cozy half hour, but it turned into a pretty lengthy show, largely because of the hilarious comments from the audience. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. There's a lot of doom in the world, but my God, if you let all of the bad people take away all of your enjoyment in life, they've just won without firing a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it was funny because I came away from that podcast feeling quite envious. I'm not talking about you. I wasn't envious of you. I was envious of, wow, what I missed out on as a child. What I missed out on as a child, and that was just like so glorious to listen to, and at the same time, it kind of broke my heart as well.
Well, what was your relationship like with your parents?
Well, we went over that somewhat.
No, I
in
mean,
the-
but the people who haven't heard the prior show. So sorry,
yeah,
if you could just
sure.
give us a brief refresh.
Yeah, I never had that kind of relationship with either of my parents. Um, and yeah, I had to kind of just make my own way in life as best I could. But and it feels so tragic. In some ways, it feels so tragic to me because, like, how difficult is it for a parent to just like the wonder of a human life is it's so incredible just on its own, standing by itself. It's just an amazing thing. And then, so how, if you have a child, how difficult is it to have that kind of relationship? Like, it seems like insane to me that that isn't the norm. That's that is the rule, not the exception. Maybe I've got this mixed up a little bit, but I don't understand it. I can't wrap my head around. I just don't get it.
It is a real
It
shame,
seems
and
tragic to me.
it's one of the things. I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood, and there was like people fighting and yelling and cursing and screaming through these sort of paper thin walls and so on. And I even as a kid, I was just like, well, why not just be nice? Like, why just be nice to people?
I know.
Just be nice to people, be nice to your kids, be nice to your spouse, be nice to your friends. I try to be as nice as possible to the audience members here. And so, just be nice. Like, what's the big advantage in being a dirtbag or a douchebag or combative or yelling or fighting? Like, just be nice. And I couldn't understand why this seemed so hard. And this is one of the things that drew me down the road of philosophy is I just couldn't fundamentally understand how it was so tough for people who claim to be in love to act in a loving manner. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
you say you love each other, you get married, or you live together, at least you have kids together. Like, you have to be with the person. Why not just be nice? Why not just be friendly? Why not just make a joke or two or offer to rub their feet or, just why not? Like, and this is sort of a sort of foundational issue that I've had sort of my whole life is like, just be nice to people. And, I know that there are bad people in the world, but not everyone, right? I mean, that's relatively few people are just dedicatedly malevolent and nasty. That's like a couple of percentage as a whole. And I just could never understand, even when I went to school, I wanted to please the teachers. I wanted to do well in school. I wanted to enjoy learning and so on. And then these really aggressive teachers who just yell at you and humiliate you and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, but why? Why do you have to treat people this way? And I don't know that I have a huge answer for it as a whole, but it's one of the reasons why I had a tough time with religion when I was growing up was that, I mean, religion hadn't solved the problem of just be nice to people. And especially with a religion that says, love your neighbor as yourself and be nice to people and so on. And it's like all I saw around me was yelling and fighting and cussing and cursing. And I knew my entire childhood, I knew one good family. And it was a real North Star for me to guide myself by, like one out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families that I knew, there was one good family. And I tried to learn as much as possible from them, but I just couldn't understand. Like, it's a lot easier to be nice and to enjoy people's company than it is to be sort of fussing and fighting and yelling and slamming doors and cupboards and storming around. And like that's a pretty horrible and stressful life. Now, if a fight comes my way, I generally try to equip myself with reasonable honor in a conflict that comes my way. But why, if you claim that you really like people and you love them and so on, then just be nice. And I probably go to my grave not fully understanding why that's so hard for people to just be nice. In the morning, I wake up with my wife, give her a big kiss, offer to make her some coffee. How did you sleep? Big hugs. Like just start the day off well and have a great day. And I don't, so with my daughter, like, isn't it just more fun and enjoyable as a parent to just be nice and have fun? Like, why would I want to punish her or yell at her or control her? She's great. right?
No,
and
yeah.
and I would hope that she, over time, and she's doing some of it, but she would emulate the best that my wife and I have to offer because she likes us and likes what we've done, rather than we've yelled at her or threatened her with hell or
Yeah.
hit her or put her in a naughty corner and jammed her down on the stairs and like, okay, we're bigger. You're good. That's a wonderful thing to teach to a child. I'm bigger and stronger.
Yeah.
And I view most people honestly as infants in adult bodies. Like, there's this little baby up there that's just working these giant levers of a
Yeah.
big body and having tantrums like babies and crying and having these bursts of laughter like babies. And I just view most people as, not even toddlers, honestly, just incoherent babies in adult form. And I think it's really sad. And I think a lot of it comes out of just not having been loved.
Yeah.
And, I knew it would be a fun show. It's not like I want to demonstrate these sorts of things, but I'm not amiss to people seeing the fruits and products of peaceful parenting. And I think, we weren't faking anything. That's generally the kind of fun that we try to have. And just so that people can see that philosophy, the non-aggression principle, and love are beautiful things, and it's not made up, and it's a real thing. And boy, why wouldn't you want that in your life as opposed to some surly teenager who doesn't want to break bread with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's kind of staggering how a positive sum game is so rare in today. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's like,
We both win, right?
like,
Yeah.
that's so awesome to have a win-win situation because it's like glorious.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yet it's almost like, no, we'd rather have a zero-sum game or, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But,
How do people think that yelling at people you claim to love or threatening them or storming around or punishing them or calling them names, how do people even remotely think that's going to win? That to me is like, well, I'm just going to take a giant shit in my bed and hope I have a good night's sleep. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, I
Yeah.
don't understand why people take this short-term gain of like just yelling at people and dominating them and winning. It's like, what the fuck do you win? What do you win out of that? Oh, I won. And it's like, but you just humiliated the other person. You intimidated the other person, whatever you want to say. Like, what have you won?
Yeah.
You've just lost as a whole. It's
Yeah,
like you steal something, you say, well, I got something for free. It's like, no, you didn't. You just took from someone else. And what happens in the long run? You've got no
Well,
self-esteem
yeah.
your society falls apart. And like, I don't know what people are trying to win with this stuff. Sorry, I keep
Well, then-
interrupting you. Please, I'll shut up. You go ahead.
That's fine. No, yeah, it's kind of horrifying, and there actually is no winner in that situation, right? Like it's a completely delusional thing to think, oh, somehow I'm going to win by someone else's loss, And no,
Well,
you want.
that can work. That can work in a combat situation or a conflict situation. Like, if I'm debating someone and it turns antagonistic or aggressive, okay, so fine, I'll aim to win. If I'm in a fist fight, I obviously would aim to win and the other person would lose. But in terms of people that you say that you love, how
Yeah.
could you possibly think you can win at their expense and maintain the love? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah. That's exactly. That's exactly what I kind of don't understand either. Because, and this whole love thing is, I don't know, has somehow become sort of perverted, I believe, as well. Because, for example, if you truly love somebody, like a friend or your partner or your, your daughter or son, then you want what's best for them. Do you know what I mean? Like you really, really believe in them more than they believe in themselves, probably, right? And therefore, to point, there's criticism. I think criticism has sort of become kind of a weird thing as well because, loving criticism in the sense that, oh, actually, like here's a better way to do that because I love you, right? Is now become, oh, how dare you criticize anything? Because, that for them, it's like criticism is a negative thing, but they don't understand that looking out for having someone else's back, for example, right? Like if you're in a relationship where you've got each other's back, right? Then that opens up a whole world then for each of you to be able to criticize each other, right? In a loving way, right? Because, you're not going to be like reactive. There's going to be love behind it, love driving it. But love, these days, people think love is more of a sentimental thing than a reality thing for a lot of people, I think. I've heard call-in shows recently on your podcast, and one of the guests, I think she was talking about her boyfriend or something, and then you dove deep, and no, that wasn't love. What she was talking about wasn't love at all. It's lying to each other, right? You know what I mean? Like, what the hell are they talking about when they bring up the word love? Because it's like, no, that's like terrible. That's not love. That's really bad.
Yeah,
So
I think people. One of the things I think that's true, and tell me what you think, and happy to have other people chime in on this, of course. I think people are kind of walking around the world like skinless, like raw, like
yeah,
a stiff breeze tickles all of their nerve endings and makes them cry out in pain.
yeah,
And I think it's because there's so much conflict in the world, and there's so much. I mean, the doom scrolling is not great, which I can be susceptible to at times as well. So I'm not trying to be
yeah,
superior in that way. But I was just reading this article the other day about how when children see their parents fight in strong ways, they experience the same spikes in cortisol that men in combat experience. And I think this is particularly true for white males, but for a lot of people as a whole, you just face so much contempt, scorn, opposition, degradation, undermining, insults, and eye rolling, and punishment, and negativity, and so on. And I think people are just overloaded with negative experiences. And therefore, it's like asking a man with 2 broken arms to help you carry a couch. They just freak out. It is overwhelming to get one more negative experience. And this is why an exhausted population is easy to rule, is easy to control. A fearful, exhausted, broken down population. If you have an abusive relationship and the man just tells the woman how terrible and useless and pathetic and wretched and dumb and so on she is, at some point, if she doesn't get out, she's just going to accept that, and she's just going to walk around with that sort of sloped shoulders staring at the sidewalk, shuffle, and not feel like she's worth anything. And the purpose of power and authority, both in the family and in the church and in the state and in the media, just seems to be to break people down. And it used to be that society would break you down like basic training in the army. They would break you down in order to rebuild you. Now they just break you down for fun and profit. And I think people are so raw that a criticism is overwhelming to people, and therefore they can't really self-evaluate and they can't really improve, because all of the quote improvement that they were exposed to before was just humiliation.
yeah. I 100% agree with you on that. Like, it's really, I don't know. You and I have similar age. I'm a bit older than you. Wiser, of course, by
By however many minutes, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, and I kind of, I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking like, okay, sometimes I feel taken for granted of, right? You know what I mean? And I understand why. And I was thinking like, okay, I got 2 choices here with this. I can either get kind of resentful from it, or I can kind of celebrate it. And that's, for me, that's sort of stepping up and reaching up above stuff that kind of bugs me, right? My reach should exceed my grasp. That old expression, right? And I've always found that very sort of profound, that expression, because it's a very simple kind of, a few words, but it's loaded up with profundity, I feel. And that's what started me thinking about like my attitude towards being taken for granted. I thought, there's 2 ways to go, right? You can feel resentful and blah blah blah, or you can kind of go, Ash, that's awesome. I'd love to be taken for granted, because that means that I've got, I've got some value in the way. If I'm just completely useless in the world, therefore, like, I'm just a dead weight. Who wants to be a dead weight? You know what I mean?
Oh, you
And
mean you're of some value if you can be exploited?
in a perverse sense, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And I just thought, you know what? That's fine. I'm happy for that. I'm happy that I'm able to provide, help when needed.
Well, but you'll be happier if you don't get exploited.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got a couple more callers. I really appreciate the call back, and you're welcome anytime. And thank you for your thoughts. Very, very deep and appreciated. Frankie Frank, I think I remember seeing you on your way to Hollywood. What is on your mind?
Oh, hey. I'm in a work situation, working under a relative. It's his company, and it's very similar to the negative dynamic that the last caller and you were just talking about, where um, basically he's very like like prone to aggression and just blowing up. And even if it's not directed at me, it's just so tiresome seeing someone continually behave in this dysfunctional manner. And basically, I'm kind of setting myself up to jump out of this job. I have 1 month left, and then I'm going to be laid off. And I'm using the money from this job to invest in a new computer to do video work, and I'll be on employment insurance, and I can actually take a stab at doing what I want to do. But basically, I was looking for some advice on how to, I guess, endure this. Is it horrible?
Endure what?
Oh, just working under someone like this.
Well, is it a close family member?
Yeah,
Immediate?
cousin.
Cousin, all right. And how long have you been working there?
This time around, about 4 months.
And how often is your cousin aggressive in this way?
Towards me, it comes and goes, and it'll like build. So it's like it feels inevitable that he'll lash out on me in some way. But just in terms of just being a bit of like to use a derisive term, a bit of like a spaz. It'll be
Sorry, you're the spaz?
no, my cousin.
Your cousin's the spaz, okay.
Yeah, no, it'll be like almost every day, and it's very annoyingly predictable because it'll be like at about just before lunch, about 11 o'clock, he'll start operating in a very frantic and aggressive way, and it's just I know that he hasn't eaten any breakfast, and it's just
Or he's
his,
just hangry, yeah.
Yeah.
So what does he pick on?
um it's like so we're doing construction, and I'll be either just doing anything like measuring something or making sure something's level, and it's just this really what's the word for it? Overbearing kind of just like do it like this, no, like that, now, like just this sort of continual pressure of impatience.
And
And
sorry, is he right at all?
he yes, but then also he works at such a frantic pace that he'll make mistakes, and then we have to go back and fix something.
Okay, so why don't you tell him that you don't appreciate his input and it's not helpful?
I do, but it doesn't. It's I remember you said this metaphor once for trying to wake up NPCs. It's like trying to hold a balloon underwater. Like occasionally there will be a confrontation, and I'll basically have to shout at him or something like that, or
Okay, and sorry, what's wrong with that?
it's just awful. It's stressful.
Sorry, why is it awful? Again, I'm not disagreeing with you. Why is it awful?
Um, hmm. Uh, I guess it's like being around like a growling dog all the time, and it's like
Well, no, but he's not a growling dog. So I hear what you're saying, but why is it awful to yell at someone who's rude? I mean, I half yell at rude people every now and then on this show, and why is that awful? I know it's different. He's family, he's your boss or whatever, so I get all of that. But help me understand, why is it awful?
Mm. It just feels completely unnecessary.
No, it is necessary. Sorry to be annoying.
What-
It is
what-
necessary because that's what he's doing. So what's wrong with yelling back?
There's nothing wrong with yelling back.
Because he starts it, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so what's wrong with yelling back?
that it can sometimes foment resentment that where it might resolve something in the day, but then it's going to build over the next few days and get worse later in the week.
Okay, so why not take him out for a drink afterwards and say, our relationship kind of sucks at work, so what can we do about it? Like, I'm annoying you, you're annoying me, I'm still here for another couple of months. How can we solve this? Now, if he
Yeah.
says, well, you just got to listen to me and do what I say, I say, well, no. I mean, how can we solve this in a way that's not just you getting what you want, because I also have to get what I want, right? Like, what's the problem with sitting him down over a beer or whatever, right? And saying, can we fix this? Look, if we can't fix it, whatever, right? But I at least want to try.
I guess I would say I don't think it can be fixed, and it's because I've worked with him over the years, and this pattern's been sort of resolved before, where we'll have either a heart to heart or whatever, but then it just goes back into the same dynamic. So I don't think it can be fixed.
Okay. So what are you asking me?
Advice on how to endure. I guess to keep my own cool, because there are times where it is necessary to yell back at him, but there's a lot of times where he's not being directly aggressive towards me, but I just find his behavior and demeanor contemptible, and I can I think I can make mistakes by being
Okay,
direct.
I need you to specifically tell me how I can help you, because right now it's a litany of complaints, which is fine, but I still need to know specifically how I can help you.
Um,
What is it that, like, at the end of our conversation, what will be a way that you would say, that was worthwhile, that was great, what are you trying to come away with? And I don't mean this in any negative way. I'm like, I want to be able to service you like a whore. Like, I want to be able to service you. And so what is it that you are looking for from me? Because I keep trying to offer solutions and they're not the right solutions, which is fine. But I need to know then, what is the right solution? What is it that,
I suppose like a means of white knuckling it through a difficult
okay,
situation.
I don't know what that means though. What is it that you're looking for? How to endure negative situations?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you were to call me up and say, I have to get my tooth drilled without anesthetic, how do I get through it? I mean, is that a philosophical question? I mean, help me to understand.
Well, there's
You can't solve the problem because I keep coming up with solutions and you say that those aren't valid, right?
I might
Listen, no, hang on, let me finish. And I'm not saying that that's negative. I mean, I'm going to accept that if I say, well, why don't you try this, or why don't you try that, or why don't you try the other, what's bad about it? And if those aren't solutions, then you're just going to have to grit your teeth and get through it. And I'm not sure the philosophical value that I can add to that, if that makes sense. And again, I'm not trying to be mean. Like, I'm genuinely trying to help, but I don't know how to at the moment.
I might be about to answer my own question, because what comes to mind is um, there's that Viktor Frankl book, Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm paraphrasing it. I haven't read it, but he basically talks about how the people who survived the camps are the people who had some kind of future goal or thing or place to look forward to.
Well, okay, you have that. I'll give you another perspective. Maybe it will help. So if your cousin, give me a name that's not his name.
Let's just go with the classic Bob.
Okay, so if Bob, every time he yelled at someone, he also punched himself in the balls, would you feel like he was getting away with anything?
No.
Right. So you would feel like, okay, well, I guess Bob is willing to yell at people and he punches himself in the balls, which really hurts him. He kind of doubles over in pain. And then he goes and yells at someone and punches himself in the balls again and doubles over in pain. It would be almost funny at that point, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that has us suffer when we're dealing with difficult, bad people is we think they're getting away with something. We think that they're winning. We think that they're dominating. We think that they're bullying. We look up to them as intimidating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So every time Bob is an asshole, he guarantees himself a worse and worse future. He's punching himself in the balls just down the road. So I'll give you an example. When I first worked at a hardware store in the Don Mills Mall, I was about 14 or something like that. There was a guy there who was a complete douchebag. You know, it was like my second day on the job. I didn't know where something was, and I asked him where it was because he'd been there forever. And he was like, "What, you don't know where these things are? Come on, think," right? Like I'm supposed to reason where these things are, right? This is before they even had those aisle markers with the text and whatever it is, right? And I was like, bro, it's my second day, you know, whatever, right? And anyway, so I worked there for, I don't know, a year or two or whatever. And then I went and did my thing. And then I still lived there when I first started going to university at Glendon for English literature. And anyway, obviously, every now and then you need something at the hardware store. So I went back to the hardware store, and who was still there?
Yeah, that manager.
No, he wasn't even a manager. He was just an employee.
Oh, okay.
Right? So this was, I don't know, 7 years later, 6 years later. He was still there, and I'd moved on to better and bigger and different things, right?
Yeah.
So did he get away with being a douchebag?
No, not at all.
He did not. What is the arc of Bob's life going to be, do you think, if he's a douchebag to people he has power over?
It's going to be pretty dismal.
Yeah. Is he going to get a quality woman?
He doesn't have one now.
Is he going to get a quality woman?
No.
No, he's going to get some yanked out skank who's going to make his life hell. Are his children, if he ever has them, God help them, are his children ever going to love him?
Not
if they're going to hate him. Is he ever going to get quality employees to stay at his workplace?
Very likely not.
He will not. Not even likely. Absolutely. Quality people don't want to be managed by assholes if they have any kind of choice about it, right? And you do, which is why you're leaving, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So he doesn't get to fall in love. He doesn't get to be loved by his children. He doesn't have quality people at his in his employment. If this is the kind of guy he is, let's deal with the last of the four. If this is the kind of guy he is he going to get any good friends?
No.
No, he's going to get other assholes around. So he gets to seal himself up brick by brick. Every time he's a douchebag, he gets to seal himself up. You know, bad people, they don't get away with anything. And say, oh, yes, but the Epstein files, and what about the people we talked about, the architects of war and so on? It's like, yeah, but they're surrounded by horrible human beings. They never experience love. They never experience true happiness. They never experience genuine affection to others. They are just junkies. They're drug addicts in suits after the dopamine of power. It's an absolutely horrible life. Now, they may have power, and they may cause the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, and they often do. But inside, it is the kind of hell that if you and I spent 30 seconds in their skin suit, we'd want to shuffle off this mortal coil. So just talking about Bob, so you will move on, and he is digging his grave. This is the way that I see it when I see people doing bad things repeatedly. Like we all do wrong things from time to time. I see people really dug in and dedicated to doing bad things. It's just they're punching themselves in the net. It's just not yet. They're digging their own grave. They're digging their own grave. Every time you treat people like shit, your life gets shittier. And every time you dominate and humiliate other people, you can never love yourself. You can never feel good about yourself. You can never have quality people in your life, and you're doomed to an eternal cycle of being irritated by people in your life, because the only people who stick behind are irritating, because the good people will move on. And that's how old, roughly, just 25, 30-ish, how old is Bob?
He's 40.
He's 40. No girlfriend, which means...
No, he has a wife. It's just he hates it.
Oh, he's unhappily married, right? And does he have kids?
Nope.
No. Okay. So so Bob, you get to home to some peace and quiet. Maybe you've got a good woman in your life. You'll get a good woman in your life. So Bob goes home and doesn't get laid, doesn't get good conversation, doesn't get affection. Nobody loves him. Nobody likes him. Nobody cares about him. Nobody wants to spend time with him. It's a God-forsaken existence, and it's a vicious circle, because the worse his life gets, the shittier he treats people, which means the worse his life gets, so the shittier he treats people, and it's a God-forsaken existence. Now, you'll move on. Like I moved on from the hardware store, and this guy was still stuck there. He's probably still standing in the ghostly ruins trying to tell people where the plumbing supplies are. So you get to move on. I said this the other day to someone. So when I was a teenager and I first got into self-knowledge, philosophy, psychology, that kind of stuff, I begged my friends, please come along with me. Please, this is really important. Please, please, please. And I got this sort of universal scorn back from everyone, except one guy. Everyone gave me this scorn. Oh, you're just a randroid. You don't even think for yourself. You're just an objectivist. All you do is parrot Aristotle. You don't think for yourself. All you do is read Nathaniel Branden and you don't Jung, and right. You're just empty, and you're desperate. And in hindsight, it was kind of rude. But anyway, maybe I was a bit too insistent. Who knows, right? So this is like, 40 years ago, right? More. So I went all in: philosophy, self-knowledge, psychology, therapy, blah, 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 blah. I'm joyfully, happily married, have a great relationship with my daughter, as I guess people could see from the Sunday show. And I haven't checked in on friends in decades. But the last time I did, none of them were happy. A lot of them were still single. A lot of them had never even dated. A couple of them had been divorced, and one of them had become a drug addict. And it was just terrible all around. And so, it was not fun to try and teach people a better way, or at least encourage them to come on a path with me to a better way. So what can you say, right? This guy, you get to move on, and he's stuck with his shitty life and his shitty wife and his shitty job, and nobody likes him. And I mean, you win. And so we want to have vengeance, and part of why we get frustrated with bad people is we think that they're getting away with something. Oh, come on, man, don't talk to me like that. And we think that they have power, and it's like, if you don't have power over yourself, you don't have power at all. The only power is power over yourself. And this guy can't even control his stupid temper when he's hangry. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that I think that does help. And, it's there. I feel a lot of pity for him. And something
Sorry,
that
why do you feel pity for him?
probably just some amount of it's probably what I would describe as vestigial pair bonding. So, like,
No, don't overthink it. People are assholes.
Yeah.
Some people are just assholes. They just make bad decisions. They're petty. They're vengeful. Now, did he have a bad childhood? Yeah, I'm sure he had a bad childhood. Who gives a shit? Lots of people have bad childhoods. 3/4 of the people who have bad childhoods become pretty functional adults. So it is not, this pity for people. Don't have pity for people. He's an enemy. Don't have pity for your enemies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that I thought of in particular is even when he's not being directly abusive, just when he's in a bad state, I thought to myself, if I had a child, I would not want them anywhere near this person.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess it's something that's a bit of a long time coming, but there's still a bit of financial necessity.
Yeah, listen, I mean, he's an enemy, and there's nothing wrong with having enemies in this world. There's nothing wrong. Having a man is measured by the size of his enemies. There's nothing wrong with having enemies. And if you've only got 4 months to go, I would bide my time, and then I'd just spend the last week yelling back. I mean, I assume you don't need him as a reference, and, it's like he can fire you, right?
Yeah. No, and there's also significant leverage because if I'm yelling back at him, it's humiliating for him because there's other people in earshot.
Yeah, like I had this guy, I don't know if you've been here for the whole show, I had a guy at the beginning who was like, you have to answer my questions. It's like, I don't have to do shit, man. I don't have to answer your fucking questions. I don't have to accept your premises. I don't have to have you define what the conversation is going to be about. It's my fucking show. I can do whatever the hell I want. And now you don't have to answer any of my questions either. But just, I was yelling at the guy because it's just rude, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying he's some big enemy. I mean, he's certainly happy. I wish he'd stuck around. But, yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting mad at people. It's healthy. There's nothing wrong with yelling at people if they're being real douchebags to you. Again, I mean, within certain limits, if you need the job or whatever it is, right? So just be free, because what happens is with aggressive people, a lot of times is we feel that we are defined by their stimulus. We can only respond within the confines of their stimulus, right? I mean, another thing you could do, and I've done this before, is just laugh at him. Like, bro, you're just hungry. Go get a fucking Snickers and calm your tits.
Yeah.
Just honestly, I had a boss, my first programming job was snappy at me, and I made a joke at his expense and just laughed at him. And I know that was a bit of a risky move and doesn't always work, but you can just, like, this guy who called in is like, well, should we be strong or weak in our negotiations? And I'm like, I don't even accept that premise. I don't even know whether we should be in negotiations at all. So I'm not, and he's like, well, you got to answer my question. It's like, I don't fucking answer your question. It's funny, right? In a way. So don't let your response be dictated by his aggression. Like, I either have to yell at him or I have to just obey him and bow down or something like that, right? I mean, don't let other people define how it is that you want to respond. I mean, if somebody's just hangry and they're just yelling at you, just here's the thing to do. Grab a fucking Snickers bar, put it in your back pocket, open it, and stuff it in his mouth while he's yelling at you.
Yeah.
Just say, bro, you need some carbs. Like, I don't know, but this is like, or you're on your period.
Yeah, no, it's just so absurd.
Or
But
hand him a tampon.
Yeah. Start bringing a bunch of novelty items to the job site.
Something like that. Yeah, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or you can say, so anytime we make a mistake, we get to yell at people. Great. I'll be watching you from now on because I think of 5 fucking mistakes you made last week. So if that's the rule, let's do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't let other people define how it is that you're going to be responding to people as a whole, if that makes sense.
No, completely. And yeah, I think that added dimension probably helps because it is kind of like in the moment you can forget that, like, again, in the near future, I'm going to be out from under this completely. I won't have to ever again. But
and this also could be an inoculation so that you see this is what it's like when you're an asshole. So don't be an asshole, because we all have that temptation, right?
Yeah, of course.
All right, good. Is there anything else that I can help you with? Because I got a couple of texts to get to before I close.
No, of course, that's it for today.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the question, and I'm sorry it took me a little while to figure out how to help. Somebody said regarding the Florida stand your ground, I recently watched a video, he said, from a lawyer who said to immediately call 911 since the first person called to call usually sets the narrative. Somebody else said a guy just lost that case in Florida, a former prosecutor stabbing some guy in his car after a fender bender. He claimed stand your ground and lost. He was a psycho stabber. And the shooter needs a sympathetic jury. On YouTube, judge denies stand your ground defense after road rage confrontation in St. Cloud. It's a lovely name for a corner of heaven, isn't it? Benjamin Netanyahu has said Israel has been under imminent threat by Iran for 30 years. I don't think that's true. I think it's been closer to 40, but I could be wrong. Wow, I forgot this dude existed. I think that means me. Well, obviously, while you were gone, I just got prettier. And I'm sorry I didn't get to the text, but let's see here. Death to America chants as a justification. Yeah, well, I mean, that's just stuff, right? That's just noise. And of course, the other thing too is please repost video supporting the Iraq War. I never supported the Iraq War. What are you talking about? Good Lord. Thank you for the tip. I appreciate that, Vince. That's very kind. freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. And of course, the other question is, why do people in the Middle East dislike the U.S.? I mean, partly it's support for Israel, of course, but also, I mean, bin Laden said this very explicitly, that it was a retaliation for America having troops on Saudi soil, which was infidels on a holy land, right? So why did they not say death to Switzerland, right? Because Switzerland isn't in their face with all of these, I mean, so Iran threatens local U.S. military presence. Like, why is there all of this local U.S. military presence in the Middle East, right? Why? All right. Let me just see here. Let me just get that. Stefan would have been a mighty functionary of the evil apparatus if he'd gone differently. Ah, that's true, man. That's true. All right. Glad to see me back on YouTube. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate the subscription. That is very kind. freedomain.com/donate. Thank you, Vince, again. I really, really appreciate that. Very kind, very gratefully, humbly, and deeply appreciated. It's just costumes fighting costumes in some ways. Is it bad if you enjoy yelling at people? I yelled at an old man hitting his dog and I enjoyed it. Is that bad? No. Righteous anger is healthy. Righteous anger is healthy. And I know you booked something and canceled, and I'm not sure that was the right idea. Oh, I know. Oh, I know. All right. I know it all. I see it all. Somebody said that was funny, Steph, but I don't know. I don't know what you found. I misread that, Kay. The woman who yelled at the man, I thought you said turned me on. No, turned on me. Turned on me. That's important. If you start to get turned on from yelling at people, you may want to check whether you've turned into Dominique Franco. All right. All right. I'm sorry. This is a lot of comments. I apologize. Oh, you're going to rebook soon? Just scared? Yeah. Okay. No problem. No problem. I'm sorry. I'm going to not do another caller because, again, I did a long show this morning. freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. Thank you so much. Shop.freedomain.com for your tasty merch. freedomain.com/books for the books, and also freedomain.com/call to book your call-in shows. Thank you, my friends. Lots of love from up here. I'll talk to you soon.